the imagination is public interest is that the public is pushing possibly the office of the DPP to charge. Public interest is greater than that. Public interest is when we look at the larger public. What will be the impact of proceeding with a case to court, and what will be the impact on the victim or even the complainant? There are so many things you look at before you can be able to charge a person. And that is why sometimes before we can be able to make a decision, we do involve, we do have what you call prosecutor-guided investigations. We engage the other key stakeholders, of course the police being one of them. We also engage with the, for instance, the children department if a child is involved. So when you look at a matter which has been taken to court, we look at the public interest, evidentiary threshold test. We also look at, there's something called the threshold interest, the threshold test. This test is in instances where we, if you look at a case quickly, you know that it's not the whole evidence, but the evidence is good enough for you to charge somebody. But this test anticipates that a prosecutor will need evidence in future, believes that the evidence that is coming to them in future will be available, reliable, and admissible. So when you hear that a prosecutor keeps on reviewing a case, sometimes it's because of some of the issues, like when we have presented a case in court on the threshold interest, on the threshold test. What has I need to also talk about the role of the DPP and how we safeguarded the electoral process. One, we continuously had engagements with the relevant key stakeholders, find out what is happening around us. That of course also included the IEBC. It included other investigative agencies, which also was the ESCC. So we would continuously find out if on the ground there's something which we need to assist them in terms of being prosecutors and guiding them on the issue of investigations. When we talk about investigations, what does a good file contain? When a file is presented to you, you must have an initial report. Somebody must have reported, whether it's the complainant or somebody must have complained. We must have some sort of statements which are have been presented to the police. So these key statements must speak to a particular offense. And in this case, when we are talking about election offenses, there are various things we looked at. You note that most of the election offenses were committed in open spaces, and sometimes you needed electronic evidence. This electronic evidence, we needed it packaged in such a way that it is palatable and presentable in court. I know that at times we got our evidence from media reports. What we had a problem is that as much as we got these media reports, we had a problem of getting the journalists supporting us on how to present these cases in court. Of course, you have what you call the rule where you protect your witnesses or your sources. I know that, like a most recent case, maybe a case in point is the case of the Mugo Erimo case. Is complete, so I can actually allude to it. You note that this was a case that was presented to us through the media. We had to continuously engage with the journalists and see how we were going to get this evidence without compromising the secrecy around the source. So for us, I think that the media is very important for us as prosecutors to be able to, perform our duties. But we know that we also have to respect the rights of the people who you are also protecting. But we also appeal to you that when you have a story and you feel that before you can be able to take it, have it out there in the media, yeah, we appeal to talk to us or talk to the police so that we are able to manage, package the case without compromising the rights of any source you have or your witnesses. So with that, I can say that the media for us was a strong point. It was a key point. It made us speak out to the people. I know that we have been misquoted once or twice, but we have again engaged the media and asked them that when they have a problem understanding something, we are always ready to explain to them. So with that, and I know there'll be other engagements as we progress, I say thank you very much. Asante sana. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Nyaboke. I think you've really reinforced the idea that the media, the mainstream media, much as it's attacked by social media and so on, role the media plays in being able to provide credible enough information that it is used in a court of law. And I think that's what distinguishes the work that you do from other information providers. So thank you very much for raising that. I think we shall move on. Sorry, I turned off the mic. I will now move on to hearing from civil society. I'll invite Irongo to come and share his thoughts.
I've not even started. I'm being told I'm going to be given a 10-minute warning. I think my reputation just precedes me. Okay. Good morning, and it is with great pleasure that I'm the Editors Convention of the Kenya Editors Guild, not to be confused with the other KEG. I just wanted to, first of all, just to acknowledge the leadership of the Kenya Editors Guild, not just for this moment, but really for the last few years of, I guess, organization, coordination, and really promoting the idea that editors are a collective entity, that they're not serving just in their individual capacities or at the behest of a particular media house. So I just want to, not here right now, I just want us to offer a round of applause to the President. The 400 radio, television, and print platforms played a critical role in the just concluded general elections. You played that role in a difficult terrain. There were 12 million social media users, and you were all of those citizens, journalists, in terms of keeping the public informed about what was happening during the campaigns, the electoral environment, and of course the all too important tallying and transmission of the results. I think you did a good job. I think broadly speaking, as Amnesty International will congratulate the media for essentially the number of interventions that we noted over that period. You, while greatly outnumbered, the training that went into 3,500 journalists was important. A number of your journalists, I think there were something like 90 incidents of your journalists who were attacked, were intimidated while carrying out their work, particularly women journalists. And we should not forget that that experience was 28% more than a tallying center secretariat, complete with personnel and staff, including data analysts. What didn't work
was that there was insufficient time to internalize and effectively implement the MOU. There was no time. It was signed literally 3 weeks to the general elections. Number two is that the collaborative and joint framework among the various media organizations also didn't work. As was originally conceived, there was to be a joint national tallying center, but that was not the case, as all the media houses resorted to their own tallying center. And finally, which I think is fundamental, is that there was a perception by the media that in having a role in the results management and transmission, they needed to get their data from IEBC results. Now, that is where you got it wrong. In every country that has gotten it right, the purpose of the media having a role in results management, in the results, is to offer an alternative counter-check to the results as declared by the Electoral Commission, and not to get the results or project the results as transmitted by IEBC, the IEBC portal. You can get it from the polling station, but you don't need necessarily to get it from the IEBC portal, because that is where the problem is, as I pointed out with the results management. Very quickly, as I conclude in terms of as we move forward. I think in 2027, going to this new electoral cycle, or 2027 elections, the role of the media in results management should work. Tighten and address the gaps that existed. Number two is that we must lobby Parliament to entrench or to provide for a legal framework in the role of the media in results management by amending the election general regulations of 2012. And finally, I want to implore upon you that election is not a process. I mean, it's a process and not an event. Our focus should not be restricted to what we will do in 2027 elections. There's a reason why in a presidential system such as the USA, the media is called the fourth estate. If you look at the current power dynamics, despite the fact that the Constitution of Kenya 2010 has provided for a clear demarcation of roles between the organs of state, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. If you look at what is happening, the relationship between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, I think it probably would be, the country would have to rely on the media to be able to be that fourth arm of government and to provide an authoritative check and oversight across the three arms of government. Why an election, why we should not restrict our focus to 2027 is that the 2027 electoral cycle has begun. As we speak, the 4 commissioners have been suspended despite the fact that the Supreme Court dealt with exactly the issues that were framed by the various petitions. Number 2 is that there's an amendment to Parliament right now as we speak on the IEBC Act to change the manner of appointment of commissioners. I think what I'm saying is that we should have keen interest in the developments that will lead to 2027, because that process has already begun and you don't have to wait until 2027. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Felix, even for keeping within time. And I actually had not known that there was no legal framework really for events, for electoral management, and why the MOU was so important. We will now move on. We've heard from civil society and gotten a sense of the score that they rate the media with as far as the coverage of the general election went. We'll now hear from the media themselves, and I hope you're ready to fight back within 10 minutes, of course. And so I'll invite Millicent Awor, the acting editor-in-chief of KBC, to speak first, after which Mr. Kipkoech Tanui will come and give his point of view. If Linus Kaikai has arrived, we will invite him to the podium. But for now, Millicent Karibu. As Millicent approaches the podium, let me just say that I was also involved in some research around media coverage and this general election for a different group. And KBC, when we did some focus group discussions with audiences, KBC actually came out very well, and you were cited for being very fair and objective and wide-ranging in your coverage. So let's start there, I guess. So, Madam Awor, karibu.
Good afternoon. So we've received the scorecard, and I'll start with Rosalia. Rosalia, I fully support what you gave the media is a scorecard. And that is from my end. I'm speaking for KBC. Was media the weakest link in the elections? How long do I have?
9 minutes.
Was media the weakest link in the elections? I will say yes. I may add that to some extent, but that is debatable. The whole country was looking at the media. And where was the media? As our representative from EGLA has said, the media was all over. Everybody was talking about showing the world the state of art equipment that they had in place to beat competition. So was it about beating competition? Maybe my colleagues and my counterparts can answer that. And did we beat competition? We did not beat competition. We fell flat on our faces. I remember as KBC, we had our reporters in all the 290 constituencies. But everybody was looking at Citizen and NTV and then going to Twitter. KBC was very slow in the transmission of its results. Then social media came in. I'm sure we have them here. They are represented. And we were being accused of counting our fingers. Before we settled on counting our fingers, I saw NTV reporting billions of, and that was just after the tallying process had started. I felt. Then I looked at Citizen, and they were running with figures. Elections were still going on, mark you. Some zones had not closed, but we were already releasing and reporting the results. So there, I must say, we fell flat. And that is something that we have to look into going forward. When it came to coverage, how did we conduct the coverage? Hilton has given us a clean bill that the coverage was conducted in a very good manner. But is that true? From whose prism were we looking at these particular elections and the coverage? Who was framing the agenda? Who were the agenda setters? Was the media an agenda setter? Or were we just looking at many other preferred areas to set the agenda through press statements, no question press conferences, press briefings, news releases, and unsubstantiated campaign platform allegations? At this time of elections, we usually have people who call themselves political analysts. Who were our political analysts? Why were we christening them as political analysts? Why were we all fighting for the same people? Why did we not call these people who call themselves analysts? We even call some professors. Professor Buka is here. She knows what it takes to be a professor. Some of these people don't even have PhDs. Media, I believe we failed, and we need to really think and introspect. Allow me to pose a few questions. Should you find it fit, may form part of what we may take home. How well do we do in fact-checking and accuracy? Were we up to the task in the analysis and interpretation of issues? Did the media gurus leave this job to the media pundits, who came with all manner of titles, as I've said? Could we have done better in planning these debates? What lesson have we learned from the media tallying process? Is the mainstream media competing with social media? There's no, or there may be no straight answer for these questions. But these are pertinent issues that we can reflect on as we work on bettering our performance, not only in general elections, but also other national tasks, as well as our day-to-day operations. It is my hope that we shall develop a better working cordial relations in our day-to-day activities. And as EGLA executive said, let us look at the joy of Ghana. Let us borrow from that experience. And I can tell you, we'll be calling the shots. We'll not be following the shots as the media in Kenya. Asanteni sana.
Thank you. Our time is moving quickly, so I'll ask Mr. Kipkoech Tanui from the Standard Group, a Group Executive Editor and Head of News, to give a few remarks. The reason I am trying to move this along is that I hope to have a round of questions. So Mr. Tanui, just keep it short and tight. We'll get to a few questions after this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Jamboni, members of Githeri Media. And you have done injustice to us. I have been waiting to see at what time we'll be served Githeri, Mr. President. The reason why I started with that is to draw a line between what the public sees us and what we do, and the little space that is being encroached on and we don't fight. And I really agree with our brother here, Otton. The days ahead are going to be tough. The courage will be counted, and don't be surprised with the reverse psychology that the fact will be reiterated again and again that the media is not giving us good coverage. They're only good for kufunga nyama, so that they demand more. What is so important is what they get at the end by blackmailing you into a certain level of guilt. And as editors, this I thought is the first thing we need to really, really look at. Be aggressive, but above all, be united. And I'll come back to that, about the unity of the media. Because I think we are the state we are in because we only come here, have one solid voice, interact, but when we go out, it is the media houses that we represent. And along with narrow competition, which then is used to hang us one by one. And if you look at the electoral coverage process, nothing exposes us. And I've not had any discussion with Millicent. I think she'll vote for me. Today is the first time I've met her, and I agree with that. The verdict, certainly for us, is that there is very little to defend, other than the fact that, yes, we are courageous, yes, we stand for something, but then what are the tools, what space, what are the capabilities we have? So when you look at how the two things that came up out of this election, deep state and legitimization, or the legitimization of something called deep state that's a player in the election process. And number two, that rigging or altering the results is an acceptable form so long as you are not caught. Guys, by opening the door for that to be discussed, to be legitimized, is going to be part of, unfortunately, our electoral process up to 2027. But that said, I want to really thank Otton and Felix, because they have said something that is very important. When does the election calendar begin? Is election coverage on election day only, or a few days to election? Civic education, for example, was not done. What's the audit process that we make for the electoral process itself? How good are we in understanding the processes of election? You had about one commissioner who had run for an election, failed, and within the 4-year period was nominated as a commissioner. That was already a misnomer. This thing should not get us in the end or when it is past the fact. So I'm going to pick 10 things very quickly that I'm going to talk about in terms of ourselves as the media. One is that election is a process. We must be involved from day one. An election to another, we should be looking at election preparedness in terms of even the election after 2027, because once we get the systems right, we will all be ready. But as Millicent said, if our idea of election preparedness is what kind of graphics, what kind of technology we are going to use, how will we look better than Citizen or Standard or KTN? We forget the enemy out there. And we forget that there are so many bulwarks, so many barriers that are being put on where we work. As we work, because of the simple reason that most of the advisors, the expert advisors to these political actors are actually among us. If not here, they have actually formally crossed over. And if you want to know, just see the migration at the end of an election. How many people are put out their CVs? How many people are raised their antenna trying to see how they can actually take credit and say, unajua ni sisi ile maneno mzee tulifanya hivi mama. The reason why we are talking about KBC ni mimi ama Standard ni mimi, sisi ndio tulikuwa background. Those are the things that are truth that we have to tell ourselves. So, election is a process, and I believe that in this tenure, cake as we are, we should be able to set the tempo as we go. How do we lay the foundation for, say, a 10-year coverage of election? The election cycle, the election calendar exists, but the processes, the level of preparedness does not change. Let me give you an example. One of the most embarrassing things, and that was number 2, the logistical nightmare of organizing a tallying process. I hope, when I look at myself, that I hope this is the last election that I'll cover as an editor. Because I don't want to see this. We go with a lot of energy. We pick young university students, we put them in a room and we say we are going to duplicate what the IEBC does and be able to give us parallel results without any logistical preparedness. What kind of money do we have? So we divide ourselves. If Nation, Standard, and all media houses were to appropriate the cost of setting up a tallying center that is industry driven, we would go very far. And therefore the presence in every polling station would make sense. I was seeing in the Standard Group, after all the chaos that we had witnessed, I was so surprised. One of our institutions was saying, I think 2 days or 3 days to election, that they'll have presence in all polling stations. I say, this is a big joke. These guys don't know what it takes. Remember, and I hope this will not go beyond the 4 minutes, that the acting process takes place. So wherever you are planning, there is somebody else planning to undo. And we have all been victims, and we must say the truth to ourselves. Why the figures that you are talking about, Millicent, that they were going to millions at the start. That might not have been Nation Media Group. Somebody has captured their devices and now is driving. And I'll say this, because of poor preparedness in terms of technology, like ourselves as a Standard Group, we had an homegrown solution. We came up with a solution that became the entry point for the viral attack that crippled us for hours. At the same time that Citizen was down. And so when you are doing this, what level of guarantees do you have of success? You are being attacked one by one. And we must say the truth that we were hacked. There are people who specialize in that. And the reason is to discredit your system so that you start seeing figures you do not believe. We were keying in some areas and then you come and find like a constituency that is already reading less than even the registered voters. You wonder who has entered these figures. So guys, you have so many enemies out there. You can't afford to be disunited and just have that ornamental or artificial look of unity when we know who are attacking us. The other, and very quickly, because she has not come closer, there is technology. Talked about that. We need to think about the technology we deploy. As an industry, we need to think about these monster opinion polls that give us headache year in, year out. The reason is that either we use the wrong methodology, and Prof. Nyabuga will have, I hope you have time to address that. Either, or we are using, or we are so, the sample that we use are outright liars, or there is a disconnect between the true outcome of opinion polls and what comes out in the end. So and as a policy, what opinion poll should we use? We solicit us to run opinion polls. We don't know who sponsored them. We don't know in whose interest. We don't ask questions. We run them and say, Ruto is ahead by 2 points, Raila is ahead by 1, so it becomes, and a friend of mine was telling me, the moment you see the number 2 person, be sure that is the number 1. It's actually mental manipulation. Number 3, training in election process. Autumn, that is something that I want to profess. There is a lot of ignorance in our newsrooms. We don't want to face it. In terms of the actual legal steps that we take through our reporters, how do they understand themselves? You know, one of the tests that I was using is the minor KI ruling. What was the impact? How many know here and out there? I know you may know, but does that cascade and the impact it had? And the other is fake news. So we run a parallel system in Kenya. You've heard that the Aslan National Intelligence Bureau is back, and it said it's by public demand. Do you know who they will be discrediting? Watch your steps where you are going after nightfall. Or the president. And because this is exactly what used to happen in 1992. I was still in college, but you remember those kind of briefs and all that. So there is nothing new is happening in this country. The circle is going back. You only need to look at history to predict where the future is going. We've talked about technology. Divide and rule, I've talked about it. I don't want to prolong. Then there is something that I raised yesterday and with Kenakwam Chetsi, and we discussed it, and I hope we'll have time to discuss the extra sensitivity by the judiciary to the point that we are pushed to be cowards because it is a red-hot metal you don't want to touch because you burn your fingers with suits. So it pushes you to a corner that you are too careful to the level that you let anything go. And I was saying, one of the members there sent us a coded message. I hope you, the Standard Group, because the other time you burned your fingers in the other election, I hope this time you goof enough to buy me a ranch. Yeah?
Your time?
Yeah. Food for thought, guys. Because this is the reality of our country. It is something that we have to think about. And so long as we don't fight that Githeri media thing, it's not easy. Finally, I want to leave you with a quote by Mahatma Gandhi. He said, "I'll never allow anyone to walk through my mind with their dirty feet." I don't know how many of us have opened up our minds for all manner of feet to trample on, and therefore the question would be, at what kind of media do we have in the end? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, the reason I was trying to keep time is to allow us to actually engage a little more. And Mr. Tanui, I think you've left us on a very provocative note because you're essentially saying, by the way, I was very surprised that the harshest criticism here is coming from within the media itself. It is here, not the media scorecard guys, and it is not the office of the DPP that's given the harshest criticism. So it's indicative that we are, as media, you're reflecting deeply and internally, and this is important. I'd like to invite some questions from the floor. We can take a couple of rounds as we wind up the session. I think we can start from there. Moriah, we have a mic? So let's start from Aduda, Shimoli. We'll go like this. Shimoli, Kwamchetsi. Sorry, I can't see you at the back, but the gentleman at the back as well. We'll take a round of 4. Just keep it short and quick, then we will respond, and then take maybe another round. Thank you.
Thank you, Session Chair. Thank you, panelists. Quite insightful. 3 things. 1, I have reservations about media tallying centers. So Rosalia, if you go into 27, I think it's something we need not waste our time on. We failed since 2007. 2, Madam Jacinta, 2 quick questions. 1, as ODPP, I want some thoughts about the fact that we allow candidates with some issues around them to be nominated and get passed through the goal. What advice do you have? Secondly, you mentioned about the use of media evidence to support some of the litigations being taken to court. Now, we have a challenge, and I want some clarity and your thoughts around this because it puts the media in a awkward situation. So I would want your thoughts around it. Thank you.
To Shimoli, I believe.
Thank you. And I'm glad that media colleagues have saved the day by being a bit more honest than these other people here on media coverage. And for me, I believe in the test of the ordinary man in the streets. I've had this glossy assessment of media coverage of this election, and asked myself, if you stood at Kencom or Bombolulu bus stop and you asked one person, did the media perform a good job or did they not? What answer will you get? Yeah, I mean, it's clear. So this glossy is a bit misleading. What about journalists celebrating appointment to directorships of state corporations? Isn't that bribery? And close to an election, why aren't we criticizing those? What about stories of headlines being written in the OP? There was a whole budget in the OP and a whole unit with journalists, by the way, writing stories that influenced, which made it onto page 1. And me, when I say that, I know, because I've run a newsroom. And now I'm outside here. I know what can be done. I know how experts in journalism and communication can be used by the other side to do it. What about those? Were these assessments of media qualitative, quantitative, or process-driven? Because I think we are more on the process than on the fact of what happened. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Can someone get the mic across?
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists. I'll be very quick. ODPP, we were watching TV with you, and we also watched what happened at the Supreme Court. Does your office believe there were acts of criminality at Bomas? And is there any need for action on those thresholds that you talked about? Number two, this is to my friends and colleagues, Millicent and Tanui. Why is there, or why was there, resistance to learning? I know for a fact that media were offered training. They were actually offered free training on how to interpret and manage large sets of data, and they refused. They turned down that training. So is there a reason, and I tie this to what Aduda was saying, because I know that the tallying system at the nation in 2007 was collapsed. The investigation was inconclusive. So is there also a refusal? Is there a strike by the media in terms of actually being able to provide electoral truth? Well, the thing about the managing the data dump, there are certain things that IEBC did in terms of providing all that data together suddenly at the same time. And there are problems around open data, yes. But there was also a refusal to use modern data techniques, such as textstruct, to convert PDF into analyzable data. Ultimately, I think the question would be, should media even pretend to be offering, this is to Millicent and Kip Koech, should we even pretend that we are offering oversight on elections, or we just accept that our role is to report what the IEBC says?
Thank you. Let's take one more, and then we shall hear from the panel.
Okay, my question goes to the DPP. I think DPP in this election played more roles than its prosecutory roles, because we saw cases where the DPP was, quote unquote, used to settle political scores. And right now the DPP is confessing he was actually used to settle political scores, not outrightly confessing it, but by their actions, dropping cases which you think, which you thought were solid and watertight. And recently, as early as yesterday, dropping a murder charge, which you would not think would be political. So number one, what was political about the Cohen case that needed to be dropped? Is it because of poor investigation by the DCI? How poor was it? And what will an inquest do that the DPP will not be able to do? And knowing the history of inquests, there's no inquest that has led to a prosecution. So basically, somebody who was thrown into what do you call that place, underground? The sewer. The septic tank, yes. Somebody might get away with murder because of that. And then what are you doing as a DPP to stop the further politicization of your office? Because clearly you've admitted there was politicization. So what are you going to do to stop it being politicized further? Yet you're supposed to be an independent office. What is the point of independence if you can't exercise it? Then the other issue, maybe to my media colleagues here, you say that there were constant efforts or calls for a joint media tallying center. So why was there no joint media tallying center? It only made sense. So at what point did it stop making sense? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll take that round. I know the office of the Jacinta, you have a lot of work, as do the media colleagues, but I'd also invite Irongo and Felix to speak to some of the issues. Rosalia, if there's a comment you can make, we'll invite you to make a comment as well. Shall we start with the office of the DPP?
Thank you very much, and it's good that we are getting the questions. This is the opportunity for us to clarify some of the issues. Maybe starting off with the last question, maybe that one is one which is, and I think I may have a hand at it in the sense that I know about it. There is no politicization on the case. And I think there was a statement which was issued by the office which clearly indicated that we review files as they come. If you note that we are not withdrawing cases because there is some political aspect around it. When you review a file, you look at the evidence. Initially, I talked about what you refer to as the threshold test. When the case comes to you, and some cases, in some instances, cases of murder, cases of sexual violence, you may need to take the person to court on the initial prima facie case or the evidence that you have in the beginning. As you review, as you wait for the evidence which you need to crystallize your case, and the evidence is not forthcoming, you may need to take a back step, review the case, and have it either withdrawn with a view of, tightening the gray areas. You just don't withdraw and say that that case is dead. Withdrawing or a nolle prosequa does not mean that a case is dead. An inquest, and I may need to correct you, there are situations where inquests have led to prosecutions and we have had convictions. I may need to give you some of the data. I know that I handled some 2 cases in Kisumu and 2 in Kiambu, where it started with an inquest, but later on we prosecuted that case and those cases and we got convictions. So I may need to correct you that that is not the situation. An inquest opens an opportunity for people to come and talk about things which were very gray, especially in a case where you take a case and you just say napeleka kesi itakunywa maji. That is not what we want to do as prosecutors. You want, when you're taking a case, you're sure that there is no evidence that is weak or that is contradictory to the extent that you'll have somebody acquitted prematurely. That is what we refer to acquitted under Section 210. Then you can even be sued as an office. So when we pull back and say, let this case goes for an inquest, take it from me, we are giving an opportunity for the complainants, victims, families to talk about their story. So that's how we handle inquests. I know that I was also, just 1 minute, I was writing the question. One of our colleagues has asked about why we allow people to contest on matters, especially if they have criminal cases or they are suspects for that matter. I also want to draw you to your attention that clearing of candidates is not the mandate of the Office of the DPP. And we can confirm that the Office of the DPP wrote to the relevant institutions. We wrote to IBC, we wrote to ESCC and other investigative agencies and asked them, can you clarify some of this and maybe make a report? What we can do as an office is direct the relevant investigative agencies to do their bit and possibly report to the IBC. And if you look at the role of IBC, it's very clear. They are the ones who are supposed to look at a candidate's background, do the background check, and then it can also refuse them not to participate in an electoral process. And by the way, the Office of the DPP's role is not just discontinue just cases or maybe institute or discontinue. We also advise. We also advise investigative agencies. We advise even complainants, even accused persons, depending on the person who has presented a report to us. So I don't think that there is anything that is hidden in terms of how we handle our cases. There are some questions which may have been asked, and I think it's only fair possibly if the CEO himself, the DPP, might need to answer, because there was a direct question why on the CEO himself, the DPP, I think it's only fair that he answers some of those questions. But when you speak to the fact that it is the ODPP itself as an office, then I think I've attempted to answer some of your questions. There is a question which was asked by our colleague, Please just repeat it, or something to do with Aduda, Mr. Aduda. You asked a question, the second question, I think I forgot what exactly you needed to get out of it.
Thank you, Madam. What my question was, you had indicated that there are incidences in which your office would want to rely on evidence from the media to help in litigation. Now, there's a provision among the media that they are not keen on having evidence from their news sources or being called upon to, give evidence which may even require them to go to court. So I wanted your thoughts about it because it's a gray area that for us in the media we have difficulty around. So shed light around that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is a gray area. What we do, we will not only rely on that particular piece of evidence. What we do is guide the police to the effect that there's evidence around this. Please do, even if it's not talk to the source, try and get to talk to the source. Okay, even we'll talk to the source, possibly under a protected situation, and we'll never release this kind of information. So you get other evidence which will support this electronic evidence. I agree that electronic evidence has also given us a problem, especially if it's evidence that has been brought out in the media. That is, we try as much as possible to get other evidence that will be able to support that evidence that is within your source without exposing your sources. So we try to keep that relationship between us and you as the media. There's the issue of acts of criminality at Bomas. The Office of the DPP actually wrote to the Inspector General and directed him to investigate and forward the file to the DPP to give further direction. So that is something we dealt with, and we handled it to its logical conclusion. So we are waiting for the file to be brought back to us, and then we can give directions. I think I've attempted to answer as much as possible. Thank you very much.
Okay. I think I have not, I imagine the notoriety of the longest presentation, so I've been one to be very short and very brief. My apologies. I'll begin with the easiest, which is, first of all, a clarification, guys. We do not, let's not go with the impression that we've come here to hang ourselves. Yes, there is a very good job we did, but we have to raise the bar and acknowledge where we failed. But it's not that we are completely neutered and unable to move. So, we are not going to give up and say that since now that has happened, let us forget that we are the watchdog. We are trying, but there are certain, we must also appreciate the environment in which we work in. First of all, okay, so we must also appreciate that there are certain economic realities in which our newsrooms work on, and probably when you are offering the training, the editor that you talk to is worried about the number of people that have to be freed for the training vis-a-vis the work that is going on. And again, that is what I talked about, that this thing is a continuous process. These are things we should be doing, not letting it, we clock our calendars at the last, say, 6 months, and we want to do so much that we have failed to do. And that's why I said, I really hope during this conference, we set the base for a long-term planning for elections. On the issue raised by David Aduda, we really need media talent center. There are two ways to look at it the world over. Either it is industry-driven, so we pull resources and we make sure we are everywhere and we are able to relay in real time, so long as we have a technological support for it, that we pull resources as the industry. The other option is we go the American way, where I think the American Britain, where it's outsourced. So there are people, there are companies that are experts in doing that. They do it for you, then we pay them. So it's food for thought, but let's not give up on that.
At least now we know that the results will come. It's just collating. We had a very rough experience. Do you know, at one point we had the entire, the finance director in our place said, okay, I see you guys are slow with figures, let me bring my department. So he brought finance department who are used to doing the payroll to help us get these figures from the system. But you see, the thing was you had to download the paper, you know, remember the forms. So it's not that we were slow. The process itself is very tedious. So there is that. Then Shimoli, I agree with you about the external pressure. Let me just make a declaration. I'm not aware of a netline that was ever written by OP that went through my hands. So on that, but it is a red flag you have raised, that what are the levels of manipulation do we go through? And what do we do to guard ourselves against that? This is now more of a moral issue, an ethical issue which cannot be legislated, because somebody will bring and tell you, oh, this has happened. You do not know that that is somebody's brief. So as editors, it's something that it's food for thought. The other issue that I really, on the issue of tallying centers, the final one, how do we bring in our CEOs into this process, thought process that we are talking about? Because eventually the decision making, as you have seen with the evolution of time, the level of influence by editorial in companies at the time that their resources are fledging has really gone down. It's a bit suppressed. So you want to speak and you are told, but even, you know, the issues that our own domes, yeah? Wanyama unajua hiyo. So unaulizwa sasa, hata kama nyinyi mnataka pesa, tunatoa helicopter, mtalete nini, no, this time watu wamekufa, what will we do? So those kind of things. So it's food for thought. So I think what the most important thing is we have set the ground for moving forward. That is my joy today. If we appreciate, we pick out these issues, we see how to trash them and move forward with courage. Thank you.
I'll also be very brief. But what I would want to repeat is that we are the fourth estate. And the fourth estate is under attack. And until the fourth estate realizes that it is under attack, we shall be doing an injustice to the society. So right now, we may be talking about journalists being laid off. We may be talking about being gagged and all that. But bottom line, what kind of a society do we want? I can see that most of us here are in the, it's called stairs of 40 plus. If we cannot create a clear path for the 30 plus, we shall have a dead media in the next 10 years. So when we talk about elections, and in elections we get leaders, if we cannot get good leaders through a proper electoral process guided by journalists, then we are setting the ground for stupid leadership. That I can repeat. So what am I saying? I am saying that as long as we have Media Council of Kenya releasing research that this was the most watched, this was the most viewed, this was the most that, without looking, maybe this is not their role though, at what ought to be considered to be right and good for the public, we are going nowhere as journalists. When we talk about the JOY of Ghana, it was a slow, painful struggle for them to reach to the point of calling elections as journalists. Yes, we know that we have an electoral system. and I will speak without fear, that at the point when all media was relying on Chebukati, who was very ironically telling us that we have the results displayed, why can't you count? Chebukati was actually laughing at the media. At no point did any of my counterparts speak up or even say that I want to be a friend of the court when we had the petition. And believe you me, from where I sit, the figures that were being presented changed from, I don't know, JPEG to clear pictures. We have teachers across this country. When we say that we cannot provide 46,000 or 47,000 people to cover the polling stations in this country and give us proper results by taking pictures, then as journalists, we don't have a future. From where I sit, we should be talking about making our voices heard as the alternative. Our tallying could have taken maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month. But eventually we could have come up with proper results that the courts could have touched like this and felt that this is real. So please, 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 we have to be somewhere. We have to set the pace. We have to be agenda setters, not agenda followers. That one, I'm begging my colleagues. Let us do something. Otherwise, we have no future as journalists.
I think I'll stop you there. Thank you.
you.
Your point is made. I think we will have comments, closing comments. And I know Felix will make it brief. Irongo, I think I'll give you the mic after this.
Very, very briefly. Thank you very much. I'll respond to the question by Eric and Aduda. I don't think Irungu and I painted a glossy picture on our assessment of the media. I want to persuade Eric to note that ours was an outsider perspective. So we may not have been aware of some of the intricacies and some of the things that happen in newsrooms or in your media organizations. In any case, I restricted my comments, my observation to the role of the media at the tallying center, because that is exactly what we did, and I think I made that very clear. And in terms of scorecard, I gave it at 55%, which I think is a C, which is hardly flirtatious. So, and in my concluding remarks, I did challenge the media that this is an election is a process. That process has already begun. And I'm yet to see the media, and I challenge the media to ask very difficult questions, and even indicated that if you look at the current power dynamics between the three arms of government, this country will have to fall on the media to offer adequate checks and oversight, especially in this new electoral cycle of 2022 to 2027. Take, for example, I am yet to see very hard questions being asked about the removal, for example, of the 4 IEBC commissioners. One is that the grounds, as I indicated, is based on what the Supreme Court had dealt with. I am trying to come to terms with the fact that did the Parliament or an administrative tribunal that has been formed, can that tribunal sit in appeal to review the judgment of the Supreme Court? An administrative tribunal is lower than a high court. So these are some of the questions that I expect to be asked. But politically, two things. One, the opportunity to remove the four commissioners, considering the fact that the chair and the 2 other commissioners are set to retire in January, potentially hands over the appointment of 7 new commissioners to one person, who potentially will be a candidate in 2027. The other issue is that Kenya is set to conclude boundaries delimitation exercise. is there a relationship between the new commissioners and the boundaries delimitation exercise that is intended to be concluded by 2023? This is a question that I think you should ask. But how you will play this role, I don't know. When the CS representative spoke, or the majority of questions that came from the media here is either when they will be paid or government advertisement. They say that EU calls the pipe, what is the expression? Piper pays the tune. I don't know how you're going to play that role. Finally, on the National Tallying Center. Adoda, I want to persuade you. First of all, this is a media session, and so we owe it to fact check. It wasn't, yes, the tallying failed in 2007, but for a completely different reason. I want to persuade you, as I've said in different forums, that the best election that we've ever had in this country was in 2002. In 2002, President Mwai Kibaki was declared to have won the presidency on the basis of the results that was transmitted by the media. Uhuru Kenyatta made his concession speech at Serena on the results that was transmitted by the media. The Electoral Commission was way behind you people, and you did it in 2002. And that arguably is the best election we've ever had. And then again in 2005 referendum, the referendum results what was declared by Kivwitu on the results as was relayed and transmitted by the media. Fast forward to 2007, when the result had been, the margin had been created of close to 2 million between Raila Odinga then and Mwai Kibaki then, the Interior Minister then gave a decree stopping all the media organization to stop tallying. And the rest is history. It was the amendment was done to the election general regulations, and that is how we ended at this. Ladies and gentlemen, the media has done this in the past, and I think for our elections to be credible, particularly going to 2007, you really still have a role in results transmission system. Thank you.
Because of time, let me just talk while walking. Oh, I think I can't do that actually. I could have stood there. Okay. So first of all, just to say how refreshing it is that the strongest critique has come from within the industry, and that is definitely the way it should be. To misuse another phrase that is used often and will be of use to you in the afternoon. The wearer of the swimming costume always knows where it pinches hardest. I was going to say bikini, but then it would be sexist and exclusive of those of you who will be wearing swimming costumes and not bikinis. So I think there are a couple of things. I think your greatest threat is state capture, and I think also corruption. We have gone way past the conversation of the envelopes. We now talk in terms of cars, in terms of houses, and as I think has been pointed out by Shimoli, directorships within the industry. So I think that it cannot be emphasized more than I think we can. I think the second point really is to focus a little bit on the how does the industry protect itself collectively and in a uniform way. And I suspect that the violence that might come to the sector, to a free press, will not come in the most direct ways. It will not be arrests. It will not be detentions. It will be redeployments. It will be demotions. It will be dismissals. And I think that's where the Editors Guild needs to find its feet to be able to declare what is legitimate, I guess, in the context of the financial challenges, and what is illegitimate in terms of executive overreach and muscling of the press. I thank you very much, and I end with the same way that I did last time, to thank you for your work and encourage you to be bolder and much more courageous in the years to come.
Thank you. Rosalia, would you want to speak from there?
All right. The question asked by Adu.
I'm getting a lot of heat from the side here, so Rosalia, please just wind it up, then we can finish.
Okay, on the question asked by Aduda on that we do not need tallying. Yes, we do need tallying, but the mode of doing it's what will make the media stand out. It needs to be an industry-led process, while every media house does its own its own separate tallying. That's because of the various differences in capacity and technological advancement in the various newsrooms. So yes, we do need it. Industry-led, led by KEG, but then every media house does its own, because in the report we noted that there was very different capacities for the various media houses. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we give a round of applause to our panelists? I think I'll make the point that with all the issues notwithstanding, the technological issues, the political pressure and so on, there is a sense that the media did a big part of its job. But I think there are some questions that have been raised and issues that need to be looked at. The Office of the DPP, I think even in your response, there may be some harder work you'll need to do to convince not only the media but the citizenry that you're independent, that the work is not politicized, because I think it is not always obvious and clear that your office is independent. And the comment I've heard across the board is that this process involves many people, including civil society, including media. In fact, I was surprised by the framing of the media as the weakest link, because there are so many players doing so many things. So we can only do our best to work together. I'd like to not only appreciate each one of you, I'd also like to appreciate Moriah, who was the silent listener to every conversation, who was giving me the hardest time. So thank you for being gracious in helping me not get thrown off the podium by Moriah. Please enjoy your lunch, but I think Moriah needs to make an announcement after this. Thank you, and a clap to yourselves.
Let's also appreciate Dr. Amunyu for the good job she did moderating. Now, the good thing about being an MC is I'm just like a messenger, right? And you don't shoot the messenger. So I've been told to give you two options. There is the option of breaking for lunch now and come back in an hour, which will be at 2:25, which is around 2:30. Or there's an option 2, which is we sail through and go for lunch at that 2:30. And then once we go for lunch, we don't come back here. We go for lunch and go. So those are the two options. Option? Where? Kwa Mchesi. Okay, let me allow me to welcome Kwa Mchesi Makoha and his, because I can already read the mood. Not unless the people objecting to option 2 can actually raise their hands. There are two options. We either break for lunch now, come back at 2:30, and end at around 4. Oh, that is the question. The question is, we break for lunch now and come back here at 2:30, which means we will end at 4. That is option 1. Option 2 is that we see it through now. The hotel has agreed to serve us lunch at 2:30. I have spoken to the hotel, Eric. So do we go for lunch now? because even now we are already late. So those are the two questions. Now I've been told to frame them well. Option 1, we break for lunch now. Option 2, we break for lunch at 2:30 and go to the beach. So who are for option 1? Who's for option 2? I'll assume it's the rest. Kwa Mchesi, please let us welcome your panel. So kwa Mchesi, karibu sana. So guys, let's be attentive. We are hoping that we will be out of here at 2:30. So it's only your attention and participation that is going to help us attain that. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Yeah, thank you for being cheery and for agreeing to take the most attentive session. You know, when the enzymes are working, and it's my panel, Mr. Odek from Kenya Commercial Bank, Dr. Peter Kamunyo. There is a representative whose name I have not been given from the Retirement Benefits Authority. If you can kindly join me on stage so that we can make brief work of this. This is the most selfish session of the Kenya Editors Guild Annual Convention because it talks about us and our interests and where we want to be. Do we have our panelists in the house? Edward Odek? Yeah. Do we have, we take about a minute if we have our panelists in the house? As our panelists, as our panelists make their way up here, I am going to frame the questions for the conversation as we wait for our panelists. I'll translate it into mother tongue for ease of reference. All of us got into editorship at some point because somebody thought we had a certain level of neatness, smartness, and a certain swagger. So they appointed us into editorship. But you know, it's like getting onto an aeroplane. And there are three exits. There are three exits when you board an aeroplane. The first one, of course, is, you know, you disembark using that little staircase. And if I had time, I would have told you the story about Tanui and his trip to Nigeria. Yeah, I will withhold that one for the media ball. The first one, of course, is you disembark using the little staircase. The second is you drop out of the luggage hall, yeah, which is usually fairly violent and sudden. And the third is you sort of figure out you're somewhere mid-air and somebody gives you a parachute and tells you, "Saisere, goodbye. See you when you see you when we meet on the other side." So generally, the exit from employment for some of us, or for many of us actually, tends to come very suddenly, and it's very unpredictable, and it can become traumatic and sometimes life-changing. So that's the purpose really of this conversation. The people who are assembled to help me to sort of drive this conversation were to sort of help us to understand what do you need to know to have that conversation. Yeah, I'm looking for both Diana and Rosalia to see if they can help me to mobilize the panelists. So it's actually supposed to be a very important conversation in terms of how are you going to land. If you are going to be defenestrated, as some of us sometimes are done, which is you are invited and you are told that you are thanked for your service and you are handed a letter, and that's, you know, you suddenly find yourself on the world. As Bitangi Ndemo famously said, your phone stops ringing the following morning. So what is it that you need to do? The way I had planned to have this conversation was to arrange it in three parts. The first part is, whatever method of exit, how do you land on your feet? Then, of course, the second part of that conversation was how do you re-enter the world, because you've sort of been alienated from your usual or your habitual space of performance. So how do you re-enter the world? What networks do you need to create and connect? And Third, how do you thrive? How do you thrive in that environment? So, is there anyone who'd like to add to that agenda? That's the way I had framed that agenda. Anyone would like to add to that agenda or change it? I told Mariah this was not a good idea. Yeah, I told him that this was not a good idea, but you know he doesn't listen to me. Yes. Yeah. So how do you want us to progress this conversation? Because I am here. Yeah, I am here. I do not have a panel, and I would like you to take part in this conversation. Yeah, I can see four senior officials of the guild making wild gestures from the back. If one of them can kindly come to the front and speak to me, you know, it would be very useful. Just a moment. Just a moment. Okay, I'm back. SG, you know I know you are my boss, like you know when I'm sitting here, the ranks change. Yeah, so I mean, I wanted us to talk about, you know, retirement. It's a sensitive subject, it's a painful subject, especially now with all the anxiety in media organizations. I don't know, I'm told that our guests are on their way. So how do you want us to tackle this subject? Yes, Razia, my sister from, do you have a microphone on the floor? We take Razia, we take Secretary General. Do you have a microphone on the floor? And Francis, in that order. Mariah, you can help me. Yes? No. It's not arbitrary like that. It's not arbitrary like that. Let's hear them first. Yeah.
Thanks, Kwamchesi. For me, this is my proposal. I think the speakers for this particular session, having looked at the program, anticipated that they were slotted to speak between 3 and 4. So they could be within the hotel precincts, but they're not here. I think it's good that we kind of reorganize our program and fit them in, because these are very important organizations. RBA is very important. Safaricom, they have one of the most successful circles, very important. And ODEC, how you can refinance your loan.
Thank you.
You're thrown out.
That's a useful contribution. Let's listen to Razia, and then we come back to the Secretary General. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I just thought that maybe we should take a commercial break.
Right.
Because if you say they are within, so we don't know what within means.
You don't know me.
If you could be more specific, are they here? Are they on their way? Be very specific.
Thank you. We'll communicate yes. That information.
So if we have that information, then we could take, we've been sitting down, stand, stretch our feet.
I've heard you.
And then we do that, and then we do the plan that we have
I've heard you, my sister. Thank you. Let's listen to Secretary General, and then Christine. And
thank you, my senior. I just wanted to contribute to the areas you were saying that we can discuss.
Right.
And I think this is the most important thing that we need to start discussing, because right now there is a national discussion that is going on about reforming NSSF and looking at the pensions. And I think the guy from RBA should be explicit on that, what happens. Because number one, within the media sector itself, I know there are one company that actually for almost 1 or 2 years had suspended its pension scheme. And I think RBA should be able to talk to about, because that one actually directly touches us. I know another pension scheme that actually is owed 18 billion. So it means that if you retire in that company, which is also in the media, you actually, I'm told, if you retire, those guys who are earning their pension right now, I think they retired 3-4 years ago. So if you retire right now, you'll have to wait for another 3 years for you to start earning your pension. And I think that is something that at least the guy from RBA should be telling us. Why are they sleeping on the job to the extent that a pension scheme is owed 18 billion, people are retiring, and nothing is happening? And the most important one, the ongoing conversations to merge all the pension schemes under NSSF. We know right now there is this question of 200 shillings that is being paid. And I think there is a proposal that they should now scrap 200 shillings and we pay 6% and the employer pays 6%. We already have pension schemes within the media itself, whereby the employers actually are paying as high as 10%, employees paying 10%, so that is 20%. So it means that if we go for the 6%, the employers will go for the easiest one, which is 6%, 6%, 6, that is 12. So that means that the employees who are already enjoying 20%, which are right now at 20, they'll be forced now to go back to what happens, because we need to they need to tell us what they intend to do with the existing law so that we go for the opting out, so that those employees who are already in superior pension scheme, they are not forced to go for the 6% that the government is. I think that is more relevant to us, because if I retire today or tomorrow, if I'm supposed to leave a nation, I'm supposed to go and get my pension. I don't need to wait for another 2 or 3 years. But I'm not saying there's a nation that is in arrears. I'm just giving an example. I need to retire today. Tomorrow, I'm still applying for my pension, and I'm able to get my 50% in the event that I'm less than, I've not hit the retirement age. And I think that is a very important. That's why I was saying that such discussions need some good time, so that because they directly attach to others. Because actually say, when you retire, there are 3 diseases that will follow you, and you need money to buy medicine. There's arthritis, there's diabetes, and there is cancer. And at that time, you are at your weakest point, and you need this money. And the employer is telling you, come 3 years later for you to get the money. Thank you, my senior.
All right. Thank you. Christine, you had your hand up. Okay, thank you. If I sort of hear what we are saying collectively is that there is appetite for this conversation. The scheduling has probably thrown off our guests a little. Can I vote? I don't want to reopen that vote. So what's the suggestion that you would like to make? Yes? Mbugwa, I'm trying to be democratic. Yes. Do you give you a microphone? Give him a microphone. I would like to try and be democratic, which is not my habit.
I would suggest if we have subject matter experts within us to constitute a new panel, but when the old panel comes...
sorry, every view is valid. So
they are saying it's not valid.
Let's try and hear him in silence. We'll process. Professor has his hand up, and my brother who is as dark as me, he's somewhere at the back, also has his hand up. So let's take those two and Topista, and let's try and be quick so that we can get
without Komchetsi. And most likely the panelists knew that they are going to be talking at 3 to 4:30. And if they are the experts in that area, I think it's important for us to maybe go for lunch now, come back at 3 p.m. and have that session and break at the time which we had indicated, or the time indicated in the program.
You've had Nganga as well. We'll hear Topista and my brother who has a slightly lighter complexion than myself. As the microphone is getting there, you know, Churchill, please do not provoke me to be a Democrat. As an editor or as a former editor, democracy is not our strongest forte. We make authoritarian decisions.
I think I'll not repeat what George just said because he took the words out of my mouth. So I'll raise another concern following what SG had raised. Ours is one of those institutions that are owed, I think the information is out there in the public arena. For me, it's mainly the welfare of pensioners. When they are supposed to clear to clear with the KRA, those very pensioners who are owed. And yet it's the employers who are supposed to pay their taxes on their behalf. And yet KRA now knows very well who the employer is and knows very well, but yet will refuse to clear you or will not clear you. So I think the employer should be the one to ensure that you know, you're cleared.
Thank you very much. I think there's a reason we usually have a program, is to guide us. And I believe even these panelists are guided by the program. That's why they're not here now. And because this is a very important session, we might have to wait for these panelists to come at the right time and break for lunch. Secondly, even as we discuss about retirement, please, if you could also include the welfare right now. I mean, welfare as you're still working before you retire. Because I've just learned now that if I fall sick today and I want to use an NHIF, I may not use it today because it is in arrears. But, I mean, how do we address such issues for employees? Thank you.
Thank you. I've heard everything that you have said. And because my arthritis is just beginning to catch up, I couldn't climb the stairs from there. Now, these are the directions. You asked me to provide leadership. These are the directions. We will take a 1 hour lunch break. Our guests are here. They expect to instruct us and to speak to us. I shall have a briefing with them to give them a foretaste of some of the things that you have raised, so that in case they were planning to go in a different direction, they can be more focused. We will convene here at 5 minutes to 3, and we will have a 1 hour session with a likelihood of a 15-minute extension. Those are the orders. You are dismissed.